Welcome to HFY Fiction Journey. Ever wondered how humans handle the cold? Spoiler alert, it's not with hot cocoa. In today's sci-fi adventure, Sergeant Hale shows a group of shivering aliens why Earthlings call freezing temperatures sweater weather. Stick around to see if these aliens can survive what we call just Tuesday, smiling face with unglasses. If you love epic sci-fi stories like this, smash that like button, share the video with your fellow space travelers, and subscribe to join the HFY Fiction Journey. Your support helps us bring more thrilling tales right to your screen. Now, let's dive into the freezing chaos. You call this cold? You really don't know what you're talking about, Sergeant Hale chuckled, exhaling a cloud of steam that rose like a ghost in the frigid air. His alien classmates stared at him in shock, their trembling bodies bundled in thermal suits that strained to keep them warm. To them, the freezing temperature on this ice-covered moon was unbearable, even deadly. Yet here was Hale, a human from a planet they had learned was one of the most dangerous in the galaxy, treating it like a minor inconvenience. "How are you not frozen solid?" sputtered Zurak, his scales darkening as his blood circulation slowed. The Zuran's eyes flicked nervously between Hale and the snowy wasteland before them. His breath hitched as an icy gust ripped through the group. Hale shrugged, snow crunching under his boots as he shifted. "Back home, we call this sweater weather," he said, earning baffled stares from the group of aliens. The class of mixed-species cadets had been assigned to survive the harsh conditions of Yolak 6, a planet known for its extreme cold and relentless storms. It was a standard survival exercise at the Galactic Military Academy, meant to push each species to its limit. For most, it was already too much. "Sweater weather?" Another cadet, a rockkin named Tovi, repeated, his voice muffled under layers of insulation. The feathered alien shivered uncontrollably despite his puffed-up feathers trying to trap warmth. "We're lucky if our emergency gear holds up for another hour." "Are you serious?" "Dead serious," Hale replied, showing no signs of discomfort. His nose had barely reddened, and his breathing remained steady despite the thin air. "Humans are built for this. You should see the winters on some parts of Earth. Now those are brutal." Sylvie blinked, his large eyes struggling to stay open in the stinging cold. "Why aren't your extremities falling off?" Hale looked genuinely confused. "Falling off? Why would they?" The group of alien cadets exchanged glances, unsure if this was some kind of joke or if the human was simply out of his mind. They had heard stories about the toughness of Deathworlders, beings from planets classified as extremely hostile to life, but seeing it firsthand was something else entirely. Hale stood there as if they were on a casual stroll through a garden, while the rest of them huddled together, their breath turning to frost. "This isn't possible," Zurak muttered, his mandibles clicking in frustration. "My physiology is adapted for heat, and even with top-tier tech, I'm barely functional. But you—" He trailed off, unsure how to finish the sentence. "Look," Hale said, gesturing toward the distant icy peaks shimmering under the frozen sun. "This might be unbearable for you, but humans have had to deal with worse for millennia. Cold is just another challenge. We've survived ice ages, sub-zero blizzards. You adapt, overcome, and figure out how to stay warm. That's just how it is." Another gust of wind sent several cadets staggering backward, but Hale barely flinched. "You adapt?" Sylvie asked incredulously. "How could anyone adapt to this?" "It's simple," Hale grinned. "Layers and good circulation. There are places on Earth where people live in these conditions year-round. No problem. Well, maybe a little problem, but nothing you can't handle if you're prepared." Zurak's body quivered as he pulled his cloak tighter around himself, eyes wide with disbelief. "But you're not prepared. You're wearing standard-issue gear like the rest of us." Hale glanced at his simple cold weather outfit, a far cry from the complex thermal systems his fellow cadets wore, and smirked. "Yeah, well, that's because I'm from a death world. Earth's got some nasty tricks up its sleeve, and cold is just one of them." "This is just one?" Sylvie croaked, his beak twitching as he tried to stay composed. "Yep," Hale replied casually, rubbing his hands together for warmth. The cold's predictable. You can prepare for it. It's the unpredictable stuff that gets you back home. COV let out a sound somewhere between a cough and a groan. This is easier? You think this is cold? Hale chuckled. Wait until you hear about frostbite. Zurak's mandibles twitched nervously. I'm not sure I want to know. Hale tilted his head, considering. Nah, maybe not. You guys have it rough enough as it is. But really, the trick is not to think about it too much. Once you get past the shock, you focus on moving. Staying active is key. Zurak and COV exchanged worried glances. Neither of their species was built for endurance or the cold. They were on the brink of collapse. They had been briefed about human adaptability, but experiencing it firsthand was something else entirely. Hale wasn't just resilient, he seemed indifferent to the cold itself, treating it like a passing inconvenience. Another cadet, Gress, a hulking creature covered in thick fur, growled in frustration. You're telling me this whole survival exercise is just a mild annoyance to you? Hale shrugged, his breath forming brief puffs in the air. Pretty much. Like I said, it's all about mindset. We've dealt with worse. So this isn't that bad. Gress let out a low growl, clearly offended. This isn't bad? My species hibernates during conditions like these. Hale raised an eyebrow. Then it's a good thing I'm here. I'll show you how to handle it. The group fell silent, watching Hale with a mixture of awe and confusion. He wasn't mocking them. He genuinely saw this freezing ordeal as a manageable obstacle. You're insane, Zurak muttered, though there was a hint of admiration in his voice. Hale chuckled softly. Nah, just human. The cold settled in, harsh and unrelenting. The sun, barely visible through thick clouds, hung low in the sky, casting a dim light that offered no warmth. Every breath the alien cadets took seemed to freeze in their throats, their bodies stiffening as the temperature continued to drop. Sergeant Hale, on the other hand, moved effortlessly through the snow, stopping occasionally to check on his struggling classmates. Keep moving, fellas, he called out, his voice clear and steady. Sitting still is what gets you. You've got to stay active. Keep the blood flowing. Zurak, visibly shaking, looked up at him with desperation in his eyes. We've been walking for hours, he gasped. How much further? Hale checked his wrist calm, glancing at the route on the small screen. Not too far now. Just over that ridge. Hale pointed to a distant icy hill shimmering under the pale light. There's an old research station up ahead. We'll get you inside and warm you up. You're sure it's still there? Kav asked weakly. His legs wobbled beneath him as the wind howled, his feathers dulled by the cold. Hale nodded reassuringly. It's there. Don't worry. Just stick with me. GRS, the largest of the group, let out a low growl as he trudged through the deep snow. His fur was matted with frost, and each step seemed to take an enormous effort. You say this is nothing? He grunted, his voice strained. Hale glanced at GRS, who looked like he was about to collapse. It's all relative, my friend. Sure, it's cold, but you've got to put it in perspective. On Earth, entire cities get buried in snow, and temperatures drop so low it's hard to breathe. He waved at the frozen landscape. This is just a brisk day out. Kav let out a weak laugh, though it sounded more like a cough. I can't believe it. How does anyone live in a place like that? Survival, Hale replied simply. You adapt over generations. You figure out ways to manage, warm clothes, shelters, fire, anything to keep the cold at bay. And when that fails, you tough it out. He glanced at Zurak, who was shaking more violently with every step. Focus on one thing, getting to the station. That's all that matters right now. Zurak's mandibles clicked as he forced himself to keep moving. His vision blurred from the cold, and every muscle in his body screamed in protest. Yet somehow, Hale's calm presence gave him strength. If this human could walk through freezing winds like it was nothing, surely he could make it a little farther. The wind picked up, howling fiercely and whipping snow around them, reducing visibility to almost nothing. Hale squinted into the white expanse ahead. "Storm's picking up," he muttered. "We need to hurry." Kav stumbled forward, his wings dragging in the snow. "I don't think I can go much further." "You can," Hale said firmly, stepping over to support the alien. "It's just your mind playing tricks. You're stronger than you think." He grabbed Kav's arm, steadying him, one foot in front of the other. "That's all you've got to focus on." GRS growled in frustration, his breath visible in the freezing air. "Why don't you feel this? You barely look cold." Hale smiled slightly, though his eyes remained on the path ahead. "Oh, I feel it. I'm just used to ignoring it. Thinking about the cold only makes it worse." Zurak stumbled and nearly fell face first into the snow before Hale caught him. "Easy there," Hale said, pulling the Zeren back to his feet. "Just a little farther. We're almost there." "I can't," Zurak gasped, his eyes wide with panic. "I can't feel my legs. My circulation's shutting down." "Don't worry about that," Hale said, tightening his grip on Zurak's arm. "Your legs are still working. I'll help you if you need it." The group pushed on, the ridge looming closer with each step. Despite their advanced gear, the alien cadets were barely holding on. Hale remained their anchor, guiding them through the storm with his steady, unshakable presence. As they neared the ridge, Hale stopped and pointed ahead. "There," he said, his voice cutting through the wind. "The station's just beyond that ridge. We're almost home." Zurak blinked through the blowing snow, barely able to focus. He could just make out the shape of a structure in the distance, small but real. "We're going to make it." Hale grinned. "Of course we are. We've got each other. That's all we need." Kav let out a weak laugh, but it quickly turned into a cough. "You really are insane." "Maybe," Hale said with a shrug, "but I've survived worse, and so will you." Jars, his muscles screaming in protest, growled, "If we survive this, I'll never question you again, human." Hale chuckled. "Deal. Now, let's get you guys inside before you freeze solid." He took a few steps forward, glancing back at the group with his confident grin. "We'll be drinking hot rations in no time." The ridge loomed ahead, the final barrier between them and the safety of the station. The storm howled louder, but the promise of warmth and Hale's calm determination pushed them forward. The group struggled up the ridge, their bodies drained of nearly all energy. Each step was a monumental effort for the alien cadets, and even the mighty Jarrus was beginning to stumble. Hale kept his pace steady, always watching his classmates. He knew they were on the edge, but they weren't finished yet. "Almost there," Hale said for what felt like the 100th time. This time, it was true. The station was just over the ridge, a squat structure barely visible through the swirling snow. It wasn't much, but it was shelter. Kav tripped on a patch of ice and collapsed into the snow. "I can't," he gasped. "I can't move anymore." Hale crouched next to him, shaking his head. "Yes, you can," he said firmly. "You've made it this far, Kav. You've got a little more in you. Trust me." Kav groaned, his breath shallow, his feathers drooping. Hale pulled him up, supporting him under one arm. Seeing this, Zurak and GRS found a last burst of energy, pushing forward together. They pushed forward together, dragging their frozen bodies up the final slope. At the top of the ridge, the wind howled even louder, biting into their skin like knives. Hale stood tall, his eyes locked on the station below. "There it is," he said, his voice cutting through the storm. "That's our ticket out of this mess. You can rest once we're inside." GRS grunted, his legs wobbling beneath him. "Can't believe we made it this far." Zurak, teeth chattering, managed a weak chuckle. "You humans are something else." Hale grinned. "You're just figuring that out now." The group descended the ridge, half sliding, half stumbling down the icy slope. The station loomed closer, its small entrance visible through the snow. Hale reached it first, brushing snow off the access panel with his gloved hand. "Hold on a second," he muttered, punching in the emergency override code. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a hiss, the door slid open, revealing the dark, cramped interior of the research station. Warm air blasted out, a stark contrast to the freezing winds outside. "Get inside, quick," Hale ordered, helping Kav through the door first. Zurak and GRS followed, collapsing onto the floor as soon as they were inside. Hale was the last to enter, closing the door behind him with a satisfying thud. The wind was instantly cut off, leaving only the sound of their ragged breathing. For a few moments, no one spoke. The sudden warmth was overwhelming, and the alien cadets could barely comprehend the shift from near-death in the cold to the relative safety of the station. Joris, leaning against the wall, let out a deep sigh, his fur steaming as the frost began to melt. We made it," he rumbled, his voice thick with exhaustion. Zurak, slumped against the opposite wall, his mandibles twitching, asked, "How are we still alive?" Kav, lying flat on the floor, managed a weak laugh. "Because we had a human with us." Hale, standing near the control panel, chuckled as he removed his outer layer. "You guys didn't do so bad yourselves. You held up pretty well." Zurak gave him a disbelieving look. "You call this holding up well?" His voice was still shaky, his body not fully recovered from the cold. Hale shrugged. "Hey, you didn't quit. That's more than most can say." Kav pushed himself up into a sitting position, still panting heavily. "I don't understand it. I've studied humans, read everything about your physiology, but experiencing it in person is something else. How can you treat freezing like it's just a minor annoyance?" Hale leaned back against the wall, crossing his arms. "Like I said, humans have been dealing with this stuff for a long time. Cold, heat, hunger, exhaustion. We've been through it all. You adapt, you cope. It's in our nature." Zurak clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. "You weren't just enduring out there. You were leading us. Even when we were ready to give up, you kept going. That's not normal. Maybe not for you guys," Hale said, grinning. "But for humans, that's what we do. We survive. We push through. Giving up just isn't an option." Giaris let out a low growl of approval. "I thought humans were overrated, that all the stories about your toughness were exaggerated." Hale chuckled. "You're not the first to think that." The group sat in silence for a while, letting the warmth of the station sink into their frozen limbs. Slowly, the color returned to their faces, and the numbness in their extremities faded. Outside, the storm still raged, but inside, they were safe. Kav broke the silence, his voice soft but thoughtful. "You know, Sergeant Hale, I think I understand now why your species is called Deathworlders." Hale raised an eyebrow. "Oh yeah? What's your theory?" Kav's eyes glinted with realization. "It's not just because your planet is dangerous. It's because you are dangerous. Not in a violent way, but in the way you approach everything. You don't see obstacles the same way the rest of us do, where we see limits. You see challenges to overcome. That's why your kind is feared." Hale smiled but didn't respond right away. He knew Kav was right. Earth wasn't just a death world because of its harsh environment. It was because it bred survivors, beings who could endure anything thrown their way and come out stronger. Zurak, still slumped against the wall, nodded slowly. "I think we've all learned something today." Hale stretched his legs, relaxing for the first time in hours. "Well, I'm glad this little survival exercise taught you something," he said lightly. "But next time, let's pick a warmer planet, yeah?" The alien cadets groaned in unison, but there was a hint of laughter in their voices. The tension from their freezing ordeal had finally begun to melt away, replaced by a shared sense of accomplishment. They had faced the impossible and survived, not because of their advanced gear or technology, but because they had a human leading them. As they settled into the safety of the station, the storm outside continued to howl against the walls. But inside, the group knew they had overcome something far greater than the cold. They had learned what it meant to survive like a human, and that knowledge would stay with them for the rest of their lives.